Most people think the Ottoman Empire lost Arabia because of one revolt during World War I, but that is not what happened. By the time the Arab Revolt began in 1916, the Ottoman grip on Arabia had already been weakening for more than a century. The turning point most people miss was not a battle. It was a growing problem hidden in the desert itself. For the Ottoman Sultan in Istanbul, maintaining control over this vast desert was an absolute necessity. At the heart of this territory lay Mecca and Medina, the two holiest cities in Islam. By holding these sacred sites, the Sultan secured his title as Caliph and undisputed leader of the global Muslim population. Alongside this religious prestige, the Arabian Peninsula served as a strategic geopolitical shield. The Red Sea functioned as a major maritime corridor, connecting international trade, imperial troop movements, and hundreds of thousands of Hajj pilgrims traveling to the holy sanctuaries each year. At the same time, the harsh deserts acted as a natural buffer, protecting the core Ottoman lands in Anatolia from European empires expanding their naval presence in the Indian Ocean. Losing Arabia meant losing the spiritual and military anchor of the entire empire. Imperial maps drawn in Istanbul painted a picture of total authority across the peninsula, but the reality on the ground was fragmented. Ottoman power concentrated in coastal ports like Jeddah and Yanbu, and along the fortified stations of the Hajj routes. Away from these narrow corridors, the vast desert interior remained largely independent. Bedouin tribes and local emirs maintained complete autonomy. Rather than answering to imperial administrators, these local leaders operated as independent brokers. They cooperated with the state when it offered commercial advantages, but ignored or resisted tax collectors when imperial demands clashed with their interests. This permanent gap between cartographic claims and actual control was not a temporary lapse in security, but a structural weakness that left the Ottoman presence in Arabia perpetually fragile. In 1744, a political and religious alliance in the oasis of Diriyah transformed this fragile environment. Muhammad bin Saud, a local emir, partnered with the reformist scholar Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab, merging tribal power with a puritanical religious mission. By 1803, this expanding movement captured Mecca, soon followed by Medina, directly challenging the Sultan's religious legitimacy as caliph. Desperate to restore his authority, Sultan Mahmud II turned to his powerful viceroy in Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha. In 1811, Egyptian forces launched a brutal counter-offensive. Led by Ibrahim Pasha, they pushed into the desert interior, laying siege to the Saudi capital of Diriyah in 1818. The city was systematically leveled, and the Saudi leader Abdullah bin Saud was captured, sent to Istanbul, and publicly executed in 1819. But while this Egyptian intervention crushed the first Saudi state, it solved nothing. No permanent administrative structure replaced the ruins, leaving Arabia fragmented, expensive to police, and deeply hostile to imperial rule. In 1839, the Ottoman government launched the Tanzimat, a sweeping modernization program designed to secure the empire against expanding European powers. Planners in Istanbul believed that survival required a highly centralized state. Over the next several decades, the empire rolled out direct land registration, systematic tax collection, and an expanded bureaucracy across its frontiers. Most controversially, they introduced mandatory military conscription. To the imperial center, these administrative measures were logical steps to defend the realm. But to the local elites and Bedouin tribes of Arabia, a more visible state was a threatening state. They viewed conscription and taxation as direct assaults on their traditional autonomy. In 1851, Najdi tribes organized widespread tax boycotts. By the 1880s, Bedouins actively raided Ottoman tax collectors along the Hajj routes, forcing the military to deploy expensive punitive expeditions. Instead of consolidating imperial rule, Istanbul's aggressive drive to centralize authority backfired, transforming tax offices into physical targets and turning local resistance into a permanent feature of the desert. While the Ottomans struggled to police the desert interior, a far more formidable challenge was gathering along the coasts. Britain, driven by the geopolitical necessity of protecting its trade routes to India, began systematically projecting naval power into the waters surrounding the Arabian Peninsula. The opening of the Suez Canal in 1869 instantly transformed the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf into the most critical maritime corridors in the world. Recognizing the Ottoman Empire's administrative fragility, British diplomats bypassed Istanbul to secure direct treaties with local rulers. They established protectorates along the Trucial Coast and Bahrain, culminating in the secret 1899 Anglo-Kuwaiti Agreement with Sheikh Mubarak al-Sabah. These agreements effectively placed the outer rim of the peninsula under British maritime hegemony. The Ottoman Empire, possessing only a nominal navy, found itself physically encircled by a superior global empire. Turning the shores of Arabia into a contested frontier, Istanbul could no longer defend. Sultan Abdulhamid II sought to bypass British coastal encirclement and cement his authority through a massive infrastructure project, the Hejaz Railway. Stretching 1,300 kilometers from Damascus to Medina, this line was designed as a symbol of Ottoman modernization, Islamic unity, and direct imperial control. It promised to speed troop deployments and ease pilgrimage travel. Yet, the railway was an immense financial burden, consuming nearly 20% of the empire's 1908 budget. Which mattered more, internal weakness or foreign intervention? Tell us in the comments. When the Ottoman war state aligned with the Central Powers in World War I, this costly gamble faced its ultimate test. The global conflict stretched imperial resources to their absolute limit, putting immense pressure on communications and supply lines. The war acted as an accelerant, exposing structural weaknesses that had been building for generations. Under the heavy strain of wartime economic collapse, holding onto the Arabian frontier became a costly struggle the empire could no longer sustain. In June 1916, Sharif Hussein of Mecca launched the Arab Revolt, backed by British money, weapons, and military advisors. The uprising acted as an immediate accelerant to a century of mounting decay. Arab guerrilla forces targeted the Hejaz Railway, cutting communication lines and isolating far-flung Ottoman garrisons. Forced to defend multiple pressure points, Istanbul's military grip on the Hejaz shattered. The loss of Mecca stripped the Sultan of his spiritual prestige, destroying his religious legitimacy as caliph, and it physically drove Ottoman forces from the peninsula. In 1915, British diplomatic communications offered explicit support for a unified, independent Arab state. Yet behind closed doors, in May 1916, British and French diplomats signed the secret Sykes-Picot Agreement, carving those same Ottoman territories into European spheres of influence. These overlapping, contradictory promises ensured that the eventual Ottoman collapse would not yield a single, sovereign Arab nation. Instead, a complex patchwork of European mandates and disputed borders replaced centuries of imperial rule, directly shaping the modern political map of the Middle East and leaving a legacy of lasting regional discord. In January 1902, Abdulaziz ibn Saud reclaimed his family's seat in Riyadh, launching a campaign that reshaped the peninsula. Over the next 2 decades, he systematically expanded across Central Arabia, defeating the Ottoman-backed Rashidi dynasty. As the old empire collapsed, rival regional powers fractured. Ibn Saud filled this political vacuum. In October 1924, his forces entered Mecca, followed by Medina in December 1925. The century-long decline of the Ottoman Empire did not end in a void, but in a new regional state-building project. Oil would soon transform this newly unified land into one of the world's most strategic regions. Subscribe to follow the next episode. The slow erosion of Ottoman power did not just end an empire. It drew the fault lines of the modern Middle East. Next, we reveal how oil transformed this peninsula into one of the world's most strategic regions. Subscribe for the next episode.